across to the live visuals that we're getting right now. These are the live visuals that we're getting right now from the Gaza Strip. These are live visuals that are coming in from Gaza. You can see millions have been displaced in Gaza. You can see families there, mothers with their children trying to calm them down. These are the live visuals. Completely jam-packed this area of Gaza. These are possibly the residents which are trying to escape in the short window that's been made available to them to escape from the north and move to the southern part of Gaza, as well as foreign nationals which are hoping to get a window to move to Egypt. You can see families there, little children. These are the live visuals that we're getting from the Rafah border. You can see little kids there with their families, with their bags packed, whatever they could manage to take with them. We also now have with us our senior correspondent, Siddhant Sibal, principal diplomatic correspondent. Thank you so much, Siddhant, for joining us. These are the live visuals that we're getting currently from the Rafah border. Little children here, Siddhant. Families, mothers trying to calm their children. People have their bags packed. What can you tell us of the situation on ground? From what we know so far, there's a short window of about 4 hours that's been made available for Gazans to move.
Well, right now I am in the city of Ashkelon, which is near Gaza essentially, but if I can give you a ground view, I'm standing near a checkpost and there's a lot of security in and around the city. Remember, this city has witnessed a number of rocket attacks in past few days and we have seen those visuals, but we also know that there has been troop movement, there has been movement of the tanks towards the southern part of Israel, being sent as reinforcement, even as the troops, the artillery and the tanks amass at the border with Gaza. Now, essentially, as you pointed out, the Rafah crossing being opened. This comes at a time when there is increased humanitarian challenge in Gaza Strip as well. We know that Israel wants to mount a ground operation, but for that it needs to, of course, keep into mind that the situation on the ground. This is one of the most densely populated areas on the planet, and the UN has warned that it could lead to humanitarian crisis. But Israel has been saying that the reason of doing this is primarily because it wants to target the Hamas hideouts. Because remember, while the terror attack is over, the hostages are still in the custody of the Hamas hideouts. They are present in Hamas hideouts in Gaza, and the Israeli government is, of course, in a diplomatic tightrope, because any strong action, it's already pounding Gaza, can lead to the safety of these hostages in much worse conditions.
Right, absolutely, Siddhant. Let me just also explain the live visuals that are coming in right now. These are the live visuals that are coming in from the Rafah crossing. As you can see, long queues there, many families here hoping to move to safer ground. Siddhant, these are the live visuals that we're getting in right now from the Rafah crossing. People here just possibly waiting to find safer areas to go to. Now, in wake of a possible ground incursion, the Israeli Defense Forces, as I mentioned earlier as well, they've opened this border crossing from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Now, the army has ordered civilians in the north to flee to south. So, I guess, Siddhant, at this point, the question is an Israeli ground offensive imminent? And what's the plan of action at this point?
Well, since the attack happened, it's been more than 1 week. We all know that Israel wants to mount a ground operation. It has been amassing the troops. But of course, there's a lot of back-channel diplomacy also taking place. Shuttle diplomacy by the Americans. The Secretary of State Blinken was in Tel Aviv and other capitals of the region, hoping that the Americans can defuse the crisis. But remember, their assets are also in the region. This, of course, shows that how the Americans Americans have been backing the Israelis. But essentially now the big worry remains on two fronts. First, of course, for the Israeli side is the situation of the hostages when the situation, primarily because the family members of the hostages have been pressing on the government to take strong action, and with each passing day there is increased worry. The second, of course, has been the situation of the Palestinians, the humanitarian situation of the Palestinians. That remains the key talking point. In fact, the US President Joe Biden has also now commented several times on the Palestinian issue. So the Americans also walking the diplomatic tightrope. So all in all, any ground invasion the Israeli side has to keep in mind on many fronts, whether it's the hostages or the humanitarian situation in Gaza Strip. And essentially what we are now waiting is that what will be the next course of action. I do see a sense of normalcy returning in Israel. I saw it was a packed day, essentially a lot of jams I saw in Tel Aviv, which something was missing in past few days. And as we move further south today, I see a certain level of increased traffic on the highway as well. So essentially a bit of normalcy returning to Israel. But of course there is a lot of things happening on the border, and of course there is the comments coming from global capitals on the issue of Palestinian as well.
Right, Siddhant. That being said, things from the visuals also that we're seeing right now, things seem to be far from normal right now in Gaza. At least these are the live visuals that we're getting from the Rafah crossing. We're seeing a humanitarian crisis unfold before us. What can you tell us of how Israel plans to deal, as you mentioned earlier as well, hostage situation? That's a major concern. So what can you tell us about how Israel plans to deal with the hostage situation? Do you reckon that it would in any way, shape or form limit Israel's ability to carry out its planned ground incursion?
Well, your audio was not very clear, but what I can gather is essentially what will be the next course of action from the Israeli side. And essentially on the ground, the Israeli side has increased security all throughout southern part of Israel with heightened security, but essentially towns becoming ghost towns as well. What the Israeli side is now focusing on is first tell about the atrocities committed by Hamas almost on a daily basis. Now we see protests by the family members of many of the people whose family members have been taken hostages, and also the atrocities in terms of the loss of life. Remember, the Israeli side lost 1,400 Israeli civilians. This is a major disaster and a major catastrophe for Israel as well. So Israel is focusing on that. On the other side, Israel is also focusing on the security front, not only on the southern border but also towards the northern border as well. Now, a short while ago, we saw a statement coming from the Israeli government saying that it will be evacuating Israeli residents 2 kilometers when it comes to border with Lebanon. So it looks like situation in the north can also deteriorate in central Israel, in Tel Aviv. We have seen several times, almost on a daily basis in the evening, sirens going off. So it's a very fluid situation. The situation on the ground is very dynamic. Where I'm standing, the location is also, as the security officials have been telling us, is not safe.
Right, and in fact, Siddhant, if I'm not mistaken, you're not very far off from the Gaza Strip, some about 7-8 kilometers. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, the Rafah crossing, over 1 million Gazans have been displaced. The Rafah crossing, it's already considered a very unstable crossing point. What can you tell us about the situation on ground currently? Do you see any sort of movement, any sort of activity?
Well, this place is, well, you're correct in many senses that it's not far from Gaza, but still we have to reach to the last town, which is Zedrot, which is essentially a town which saw the brunt of the terror attack, and where we were present just yesterday, and we saw the evidence of the massacre, to use the phrase, on the ground. We saw the police station that has now been demolished, where the Israeli security officials bravely defended against the terrorist onslaught. Also, when it comes to the situation here in Ashkelon, it's not safe because this place has been the target of the rocket strikes coming from Gaza almost on an hourly basis, though the Iron Dome has been successfully able to intercept them. But essentially, it's safety of the Israelis and many people on the ground, many foreign journalists, including, of course, from India. Their safety, the Israeli government has been talking about that they should be safe. And of course, we have all been asked to pray to wear protective jackets and other protective gears on the ground. But all in all, if you travel around, it's only basically people who needs basic daily necessities who can be seen on the ground, journalists and of course the security personnel. We are of course have been witnessing tanks rolling several times while we have been traveling to southern Israel, and today looks no different as well.
Right, Siddhant, and perhaps another Herculean task here would be to also discern between innocent civilians and, of course, identified, I'm assuming, Hamas hideouts, and which is perhaps why this window has been provided. Is there any sort of a plan of action in that regard?
Well, if I can hear you correctly, plan of action regarding the civilians, we know that when it comes to southern part of Israel, cities have been evacuated. It's a ghost town. I mean, you can see the road behind me. If I can ask my camera person to pan out, it's an empty road, only tanks, not tanks, basically trucks moving on the road, carrying perhaps important resources to the border and coming from the border. I'm standing near the main power station of the city. It is very, this is a place which is guarded by the security officials, and you just can't move around here without showing your identity and of course telling the people who are manning these checkposts to tell them where you are going. And essentially some of these regions have been now designated as military areas, so even your presence there is seen as criminal and there can be action on you. So as you go deeper in the south, the civilians have been moved out, the forces have moved in, and the message is clear that in case of any escalation in the situation, Israel is going to strongly deal with it.
Right, and talking of escalation, there are also fears of this spilling into a wider regional conflict. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I'll come to that point, but before that, I'd like to talk about what's happening over me. I can hear number of fighter jets moving around in the sky, and this is something that has been another norm, another part of the new normalcy in Israel. Well, yes, there is worry over an escalation of the situation. We know that countries in the region have been warning that if there is a ground invasion, that can escalate into a wider situation in the West Asian region that can destabilize the region. But if I can show you more of what is happening on the ground, this is the road that leads to southern Israel. This is a road that leads to Zedrot as well, and this is a road which of course has been completely without any civilians, and perhaps in a normal day this would have been a very busy day and a free movement of people can take place. But essentially as you go down, further down in the south, you see more gory visuals of what has happened. I have seen a lot of dead bodies also on the ground of Hamas fighters as well, just yesterday near the border areas, and the situation remains concerning, challenging, precarious. Use any word to describe it on the ground here in southern part of Israel.
Right. Now, Siddhant, a Commissioner General of the UN Agency for Palestinians also announced that the intergovernmental organization's relief operations in Gaza are on the verge of collapse. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, we're seeing a humanitarian crisis unfold before us. What can you tell us about that? Do you think this window, this crossing, will offer some sort of hope and relief for the displaced Gazans?
Well, any kind of relief is welcome right now for the Palestinians. It's very clear, and we have seen comments coming from the UN calling it as a major catastrophe. We have seen comments from the US President, from other capitals in the region, outside of the region. And now, of course, as the day passes and weeks pass, the worry remains on the situation of the Palestinians. They remain in a dire situation, and we have seen visuals as well, something that it has been another concerning part of this ongoing conflict. But it looks like that there will be some time before calm prevails. Right now, there's a lot of anger on the ground. You speak to any Israeli in Tel Aviv or other parts of the country, they talk about the grief and what they are going through. In fact, in this part of Israel, you really find civilian on the ground. I was able to speak with one last lady on the ground in Zedrot, and she was determined to stay on, saying that she was born in and she will remain here. But in Tel Aviv, I've seen how civilians have been in a state of shock. I was able to meet with many of the civilians who have been directly impacted by the terror attack, and they couldn't just speak without crying. So that is the level of grief on the ground. There are more vehicles passing through. I can show you that most of the vehicles passing through now have Israeli flag on that, perhaps signs of the time we are living in here in Israel, and perhaps a sense of showing that how, of course, they are patriotic about their country. And in fact, if you travel around Israel or Tel Aviv, you see most of the cars now have only two signs. Either they are carrying the Israeli flag, or either it's written TV, television, press on them to just tell them that who they are, because safety first is the motto here on the ground. And secondly, of course, the worry remains over whether there will be an escalation, and if there is an escalation, how big it will be. So there are many factors on the ground here in Israel, but above and all, the focus is on the safety of the civilians.
Right. Well, Siddhant, thank you so much for bringing us all the updates from ground, and of course those were the visuals that we were getting from the Rafah crossing.